Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Freyberg, and welcome to Lecture 1, Understanding Writing as a Process. Let's dive in. Is this you? How about this guy? Or her? I'm more like her. When I have a writing project, I'm always kind of half looking at it. I can't bear to look at it. I need to look at it. I don't want to do it. It's frustrating. And I imagine many of you feel the same way. So what we're going to do in this course is instead we're going to talk about writing as a process, and we're going to talk about a process that can deliver results. So let's go ahead and start. If there's one word I want you to think about when you're thinking about writing for this course or any kind of writing project, professional one, academic one, it really doesn't matter. I want you to think of the word when. When should I? When should I develop my thesis? When should I organize my paper? When should I edit? When should I do my research? When should I check my evidence? Because part of the problem in the whole system is that we've probably been telling you to do things at the wrong time. For example, how many of you have always been told to start your writing process by coming up with a thesis? Probably many of you. Well, a thesis is the answer. It's the conclusion you make. It's the decision you make. It's where you arrive at the end. It's the point you want to make. And you don't know that at the beginning of your process. So it doesn't make much sense to have to think of it at the beginning of your process, right? After they told you to come up with a thesis, then they told you probably to make an outline. That's just as ridiculous. Okay. Because, okay, so they wanted you to come up with an answer first, as if this is some sort of weird game of academic Jeopardy. And then, so you had to make something up because you didn't know, you weren't sure. You were just the beginning of this whole experience of writing. And so you made something up, and now you have to make an outline of related to something you just made up 10 minutes ago. No wonder you hate writing. For those of you who hate writing, you're put in a terrible position right at the beginning. When should you do things? That's what I want to focus on for this lecture. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go back. That, in case you don't know, is that's Big Ben. And we're in London. For some of you who don't know, I'm the Associate Director of International Programs, and we took this when we were visiting London a couple of years ago. So if you want to know more about study abroad in the School of Business, you know you will always be able to ask me, and many of our lectures will have photos from our trips. So I always like to promote them. All right. I would like you to think of writing as a production process. We got to break it down, right? So I want you to think of the beginning of the process as you're generating stuff. You're just putting sand in the sandbox. So that's when you're thinking about what's your purpose, what's your critical approach, we'll talk about in lecture 2. What's your focus? Maybe what's your question? And maybe a preliminary thesis. And this, like if you have a week to write, or whatever time you have to write, because we all know we put things off to the last minute. I know that. I do that, right? So whatever it is, let's say you even have 24 hours. Then, if you're putting aside 8 of those 24 hours to do some production work, that's how much time it should take. It's not just like a 10-minute generating ideas thing. Again, so we move through the course, we're going to spend time on each of these areas. And so I'm going to give you a lot of techniques to build your production process. then the next area is this kind of management phase. And I'm just, since we're in a school of business, I'm using kind of businessy terms just for the fun of it. When you kind of think of managing stuff, you're looking at your scholarship, you're looking at your evidence, you're trying to organize stuff, you're trying to work with your paragraphs, you're trying to make castles about with the sand that's in the box. And then you want to think about quality assurance. Then you want to think about your sentences, your grammar, your punctuation, your documentation style, your citation style, which is APA. Again, we'll talk about. But if you think of this as this whole process that has kind of 3 phases, and you only do one phase at a time, you're going to put yourself in an advantaged position in terms of getting something that is going to meet the objectives. So that's how I'm thinking about our writing process. I also have another couple ways of thinking about it. If you think of it as this journey, right? It's an experience, whether it takes 2 weeks, 2 months, say for your capstone course, or it's taken 2 days because you left it to the last minute, even if it's taken 2 hours because you just got to get something done. Try to break it up this way so that it's producing stuff and you're managing the stuff, and then you're getting it ready to serve up. You're getting it ready to deliver. Another way of thinking of it in more traditional terms would be at the beginning phase, it's really writer oriented. And all that means is you're probably the only one that understands the stuff you've put in the sandbox. Okay. And as you move through the experience of creating something that you can submit or deliver at the office, then it becomes more reader oriented. Okay. So think of it as really a journey. And I guess my final image that I'll be using this term is this funnel, where I always think that if you're trying to do multiple things at a time when you're trying to write, if you're worried about your thesis while you're worrying about your organization, while you're worrying about your grammar, while you're working with your idea development, you're going to get nowhere. Okay? Because you're trying to do too many things at once, and you can't do that many things at once. You can't, and I know this sounds weird, but you can't write a paper all at once. What you can do is generate and work on various aspects of a paper until it finally all comes together. And I like to break it down in terms of this funnel. And this is something you just kind of go through. So the first thing you work on is purpose and idea development, which we'll talk about. Then you'll work on critical approach, your focus, your guiding question, then research and evidence, then thesis development, then organization, then sentences and grammar, then APA for us. Now, a couple of things might strike you here. Number one is thesis is very far down the line of this funnel, and organization is extremely far down the road in this funnel. And that's intentional. Both the textbook that we work with, Writing Analytically, and my approach to our exercises takes this kind of process as we're aligned, okay? We think you shouldn't be trying to organize your stuff until much later in the process. Think we shouldn't be trying to really nail down a thesis until later on in the experience of writing an analysis. And this funnel also makes you think of, what am I going to do when? So when should you, when should you, when should you? This is when I think you should. And that's how we're going to move through this course. So what happens is each week we're going to be working on different levels of this funnel until we get through all of them. We're going to start with purpose and ideas and do all sorts of writing hacks, brainstorming, free writing, notice, focus, and ranking, all sorts of stuff, right? Then we'll move on to focus. How do you focus when you're trying to really get specific about some work? We're going to eliminate cliches and abstractions. We're going to get specific. We're going to work on how to develop a real question that you want to analyze. Use of evidence and research. Much of this course is about learning how to use peer-reviewed, scholarly peer-reviewed sources, industry analyses, government documents, and really we're going to try to get away from popular sources that you're probably used to using. And we're going to get really good at using sources in a way that may feel a little different. We're not sort of coming into this using sources simply to back up what we already think, but we're going to use sources in a more conversational mode. And that's we're probably going to get to that weeks 3, 4, and 5. Then we'll move on to thesis development, where you're really trying to arrive at a decision and how we can get to insightful decisions. Do lots of exercises. At each phase of this course, we're going to do lots of exercises. Then we'll work on organization. We have a lot of techniques to help you organize your work. The most important of which is realizing it's going to happen later on in the experience of writing a paper. We'll talk about organizing paragraphs. We have techniques for that. We'll work on sentences, absolutely, the craft of writing and style, about being precise, about using active language, about eliminating wordiness, which is really prevalent in business writing. Now, we're not doing business writing per se, but most of you are probably used to a lot of business writing, and we are going to make sure to get tight, get clear, and get direct. And we will spend some time on working with our documentation styles that you're going to need for this program. And I won't dig into it too much now, but we'll do a little bit each week because it's really dull to do. And so if we do a little bit each week, we can get there. And we will work a little bit on grammar, mechanics, and punctuation, really making sure this is kind of your last chance to get this stuff right. And it's really important to get it right. So that takes us to the premise for this course, understanding writing as a process and figuring out when to do what. I'll see you in lecture 2.